money.
Welcome to another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a special guest, Dr. Francis. He's a licensed mental health counselor, and we're going to cover a lot of different things from mixing theology, counseling, finances, especially when we talk about couples. And then we're going to talk about business stuff. So he decided to start his business 100% online, which I'd love to get into. And he's doing something called an intensive. And we're going to talk about how he is uniquely applying the intensives to get the results for his clients. So this should be a good episode. Take some notes and let's have a little fun. So welcome, Dr. Francis.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate
Awesome. Awesome. So if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about yourself, your practice, and the type of clients that you serve.
it. All right. All right. Well, I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. Currently, I am living in Atlanta, Georgia. My practice is intentional bridges. So I provide mental health counseling services to adults, whether on the individual side. I also provide couple services. So in three areas of couples, I do infidelity recovery. I do just standard couples counseling. And then I also do premarital counseling. And so, yeah, anyone can see me. I do have a faith and Christian background, and so I have special insights for those clients, but I'm also open to those without faith.
That's interesting. So I've worked with a lot of therapists. I'm in the space lecturing, and a lot of people try to separate their theology with how they counsel. You are intentionally bringing those two together. Kind of explain why, what is your strategy? What are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, indeed. So essentially, theology, right? That is the study of God, right? And so it is incredibly essential for us to be able to study God and to know who He is and know what His plan is for us. However, sometimes we have theological application that misses things that we need, like emotional repair and trauma. Like some people will preach at you and tell you to quote scriptures when you're really hurting inside and you don't have what it is that you need to heal. And so the theology only, I think, falls short. Right. But then for those who believe in psychology only, right, that is the study of the mind and behavior. Um, what happens with that is you get to get those insights about what is happening. Why am I doing? What am I doing? However, there's no endpoint, there's no focus. See, with theology, we know that we're fearfully and wonderfully made by God for a purpose, right? To serve Him. But when we just have a psychological framework, there is no endpoint, right? And sometimes you could just be shaped according to what the therapist wants, or you don't really know what the end goal in that is. So by combining both theology and psychology, we have that understanding of how we were created, how the fall happened, and how it affects us in our relationships. And then we also have the repair, right? We have an alignment that comes only through, I believe, the combining of theology and psychology. Whereas without it, what are you being aligned to?
So, for somebody who's thinking about starting their own practice, they are faith based. What, in your opinion, is the pros and cons of instilling theology? Because it's not a free lunch. So, what are the pros and cons in your mind to help somebody make this decision?
Yeah. So is this for someone who's seeking the therapy or someone who's someone who's a provider?
The provider.
Yeah. So one, it helps you to understand what is your scope of services, right? Because I'm not for everyone,
Yeah.
right? But for those who really want to have alignment and those who want to have certain things, I can provide for those. So if you want to start your own practice, what you want to do is make sure that you are being true to what you're called to do. Right. So that you're not operating outside. Right. If I'm a baseball player, I'm not trying to sign up to play basketball. Right. I need to stay in my lane. And so I can become an expert and I can provide expertise and growth and function in the area that I serve. And so I think that there's a specific client that you can reach and you just continue to grow in that area.
I think that's so big. I have so many conversations with folks who try to serve everybody. But if you narrow down to your specific person, not only can you provide them that extraordinary service, but you kind of, to me, it makes it more a fulfilling role. People
Mhm.
say, well, I'll get bored doing that, but you'd be surprised going deeper and deeper on a certain type of individual can be pretty fulfilling.
Right. Sometimes there are doctors that are, excuse me, general practitioners. But I'm like, if you want surgery, do you want the general practitioner or do you want the person who's specific to the area of your, body or whatever that needs to be healed? No, you want the person who has the specificity.
Yeah, I understand. Spot on. So in our pre-call, we talked about, money because I'm a financial planner. And you had mentioned trauma and how trauma will affect how you actually manage money. So I got excited, as you can imagine. Kind of share with me, based off what you're doing with your clients, what type of trauma people have and how does that affect how they utilize money?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So, uh, most trauma happens in childhood, right? There's developmental trauma, but what happens in that process when a trauma is essentially an injury, right? You learn a lesson of pain or something like that, that you can't trust people in the world, or that you're not good enough, or whatever that trauma is. That sense sets the framework for how you see the world.
Mm,
Right. So if that's the framework for how you see the world, it's going to affect everything. It's going to affect the relationships. It's going to affect how you manage or don't manage money. And so if you have this existing trauma, that's already setting how you relate, how you attach to other people and other things like that. So just when it comes to the money conversation, that's just a symptom of the root of the problem. Right.
mm,
So you really want to understand, okay, what is the trauma that I faced? What did I learn about the world and myself? And then how does this then affect how I see money? So for example, if you grow up in a situation where your mother is hiding money from your father or something like that, that teaches you something about money, and that teaches you something about trust.
Yeah, I think that's big. I think people say, I need help budgeting. I'm having money. They think it's a math problem,
Hmm.
but people don't realize most finance is elementary math. Like it's really 1 + 1 = 2. So usually it's not a math problem. It's something going on inside. But with that, because it's going on inside, when the individual have money problems, when you combine two people, it's a higher probability that one of them or both of them are going to have some type of money struggle. So why do couples struggle when it comes to their finances?
Also a great question. Well, one, every couple has a negative relational pattern, right?
Mhm, mhm,
My perspective comes from the garden, right? When the fall happened and there was a kind of a separation between man and woman, and that they would not necessarily get along in every place. So that is just kind of in our nature, right? So then in how we come together and how we communicate, right? That is something that we need to learn. And so, one, understanding that negative relational cycle, which can be healed, right? Once you understand it, but then also then seeing how that applies to finances. So the reason why couples will then have financial issues is because what we talked about, the trust issues that have developed, that you brought that in even before you met your partner, right? And then in addition to just ways that you speak to each other, right? And ways that you have expectations. So expectation is extremely important. We
mhm.
all come to, whether we're aware of it or not, we come into relationships with certain expectations. And when those expectations get missed, it leads to disappointment. And how we manage and handle that disappointment, I mean, can make or break a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So speak on that aspect, the expectation, because somebody can go and say, I expect XY partner to be a provider.
Mhm.
One person says, well, I expect XYB partner to maintain the house to a certain standard. The person says, I want to do only allocate XYZ time to a child in any given period of time. And those are expectations we're all wired in, but we don't talk about them. So how do you help initially? Let's talk about early on in a relationship. How do we begin to communicate those expectations, get them out in the open, and manage those even when we're in a relationship and maybe expectations may not be met?
So what I would say is we need to, one, understand where someone comes from, right? So a simple question to ask is, what was the availability of money in the house that you grew up in,
That's good.
right? So then
Yep,
you
yep.
start to understand, okay, this is how money was managed or not managed when you grew up. Then what is your experience personally with money? Do you know what a budget is, right? Have you kept a budget? Are you a saver or a spender?
Yeah.
And so, just getting to have lighter conversations in the beginning and being open with those things. Again, you don't need to, early on in relationships, open your bank account, share routing numbers and You don't have to do all of that. But what you want to do is become comfortable having those conversations, because the more comfort that you have with having the small conversations, it then can translate later on to having comfort with the larger and even harder conversations.
Working with couples, what kind of surprised you the most? Like you may have had an idea of, well, this is what love is, this is what relationship is, but now that you've in it, I mean, you yourself and your relationships, you working with other couples, what has surprised you when it comes to couples dealing with each other?
Uh, Yeah, I think it is just when that disappointment happens, the reactions that you get, right? Because your reactions are generally going to not give you what it is that you want. So I see that there's a lot of reactiveness, but there's not a lot of focus on what is your actual need, right? So what is my need? I need to be validated. I need to be understood. And so we go so far in our reactions to belittle the person or to then hide money or not want to share and other things rather than saying, wait, why is this purchase important to you in the first place?
Mm, I think that's big. I think that's big. And you have to go through that line of questioning to really learn the person. Now, one thing you introduce yourself with is you help couples with infidelity.
Hmm.
But infidelity, if we break down the road, is really just a broken trust. So
Hmm.
let's start with give me some examples of how couples break trust with each other, and really describe what's going on inside somebody when they feel like their trust has been broken.
Mm. So, the person who has had the trust broken or they feel like the other person is not being honest with them, right? So again, does that trigger something that happened previous to them, right? That is something to be aware of or something. Or, when it happens with this person that I thought was supposed to be safe, right? I start questioning my reality. Wow, what does this mean? What other areas have they not been honest with me and everything just because of how maybe finances are going or just yeah, it just really does sometimes wreck your ability to trust, maybe because not that you shouldn't put faith in your partner, but I think that you need to have a reasonable expectation that yes, this person can do wrong because we're all, fallen at a point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what is it? I always say you have to give your partner grace
Hmm.
as you give yourself grace for your faultiness. Like, how far should that go? Because I think that's a question a lot of people have is like some people have a line of, well, will somebody step out in a relationship? I'm not doing it. Somebody may have a line if somebody steals. Should there be a line? What do you think about that? Because you see this a lot more than a normal person.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we have to do is every couple has to establish rules and boundaries for their relationship
Mm,
because I can't dictate to you your relationship and the terms and everything like that, as you can't do that to me. But in that particular couple, we do have to establish rules and boundaries. And so once we establish those, we need to make sure that those are upheld. So then when you have incidents of infidelity and other things, you're like, hey, this is a violation of something that we have established together. So it's really important that you start from there, and then any repair that needs to happen, it needs to align with what you guys set forth as these are the rules and boundaries. This is what defines, for example, the Francis family, right?
mhm,
By these
mhm.
sets of values.
Do you have a process on the thought of the repair?
Hmm.
So a wrong has
Hmm.
happened, and they want to get back on track. May not go back to exactly where it is, but they want to have a productive relationship. Like what type of reconciliation have you seen work?
Yeah, so in my work, what I do is I'll map out the negative connection cycle that the couple has. And so, one, that's the first foundational understanding of, okay, where do we go from here and why have we related to each other in this way? Then the
Mhm,
next step would be to identify what I call a negative core belief. A negative core belief is an I am statement. It affects how you see yourself, how you see God, and how you see other people. So, for a lot of times, a lot of women will feel I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy. For a
yeah.
lot of men, will feel like I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, and I don't measure up. And so when that becomes the framework through which you see the world, you can
Mhm.
then see, oh, when I believe this about myself, it then opens the door that I can do anything, right? Because I am almost surrendering my identity to this lie, right? And so if you believe the lie and that becomes the foundation through which you live on, then that's when the shaky foundation happens where you're able to step out or to hide or to do other things.
That's important. How we identify is important. I know I talk to my wife a lot. I say, hey, be careful when you name call, and it could be something sentence like pretty innocent, like, okay,
Mhm.
well, you're junky today, or you're something something today. Because I truly believe once you identify a name on something, you can also actually behave kind of or treat that thing in an inhumane way because you have identified as not human. Can you kind of speak on that as far as like make sure be careful what you identify stuff as.
Absolutely. So be careful what you name, but also be careful what you answer to. Do you not have people in high school that, you knew them as this and,
Yeah.
it's 30 years later, right? It's 20 years later, it's 10 years later, and you still identify that person as the same thing, right? So that's on the outward looking in, but on the inside, what do you identify as? Do you see
Mm,
yourself as a failure? Do you see yourself as not good enough? And so when you see these things, you are actually surrendering and submitting to those titles. And no one really should, but sometimes when it's like a fish in water, have you ever heard the parable or that story, right? You have two fish that pass by an older fish, and the older fish is like, "Hey boys, how's the water?" Right? And the younger fish are like, "Yeah, it's great." The older fish passes by, and then the two younger fish are like, "What the heck is water?" Right? They've been breathing it, it's been in their environment the whole time, and they don't even realize that this is what they are ingesting. This is what is actually giving them life. But they weren't aware of it. So awareness is so key.
yeah, yeah. So we can't go online and not see the big battle of the sexes.
Mhm.
Okay. And one thing that we discussed in our pre-call is like we're all caught up, every couple's in the system. So
Mhm.
kind of speak a little bit to that. Like speak on like the system that we're all in, which manifests our differences, which can seem as a battle. Can you talk on those things?
Yeah, I think oftentimes we find ourselves into roles, whether that's culturally, whether that is just an environment, the country that we grew up in, and everything. And sometimes we find we try to fit ourselves like square pegs into round holes and other things like that, and things don't fit. So sometimes rather than having a gender role or just a certain kind of role, we want to like focus on what is best for this couple. Right? What are the things that we need? And then know that that negative cycle, it's going to happen automatically. Right? So if you're not aware of it and if you don't identify it and other things like that, you guys are going to just flow into it. And so when you have this negative cycle that's pervasive, and then you have the roles that you think you should be doing and everything like that, that is a recipe for a lot of chaos to happen. Again, a lot of this is unconscious. So
Mhm.
we really need to become good at having conversations and saying, this is the reason I think this way, rather than you need to just follow whatever I'm doing.
Wow, that's good. So we talked on this a little bit. There's something called the marriage point of no return. So we're going to make mistakes. We're going to slip up. But there's a certain point where somebody's done, or it's going to be significantly hard to reconcile things, maybe unpractical. What is that point of no return?
Yeah. So I'm a fan of the Back to the Future movie series, and the third one not as popular, not as good. But there was a scene in there where the point of Back to the Future, you have to get up to 88 miles an hour so that you can shift and go back or forth in time. So because they're in the 1800s, they had to use a train, and so they had a color system. I think it was like green, orange, and red. And once it hit the red, that was the point of no return because the train was going to go off a cliff. Now, I took that color system and I kind of apply it. So whenever a couple comes to me and I do their assessment, I look at a certain color system. So green would be, you guys are good. Most of your interactions are positive. You have goodwill towards each other. So that's green. You may have a argument every now and again, right? But then you shift over to yellow. Right? Yellow is you start having more arguments. You're still good. You still have a lot of good conversation and communication with each other. But then you shift to orange, right? Orange is that you're starting to have more significant arguments. You may start criticizing more. You may start attacking the character of the other person. There is kind of maybe 50-50 goodwill, but then there's also significant, um, disagreements and arguments and just disunity. This is really when intervention is needed. But if you just don't do anything or you try to like work it out on your own, you will eventually find yourself in the red, right?
Okay.
The red is where you lose the benefit of the doubt. Right. So it's where almost this person cannot do anything good. You can't think of this person in a positive way almost at all. And just your interactions are strained. You really don't want to be. This is when you start seeing people separate and everything. So that is the marriage point of no return, where resentment has built up so much that it's almost the only reason that keeps you together is because you don't quit at the same time.
Hmm. Wow. Is there any way to come back from the point of no return?
You need immediate intervention.
Yeah.
There is but it really does depend on the willingness of the person. If you're really willing to put the work in, and it's going to be expensive, right? Because you are going to need to spend time, going through the reasons how you got there. You didn't get there overnight, right? So I know sometimes couples come in and they're like, "Yeah, can you do this?" And it's like, "Yes, we can." But I
Mhm.
mean, it took you guys, 12 years
Yeah.
to get to this point, right? You can't just give me 2 weeks, you know?
Mhm.
So, but yeah, they can come back. And it does take work, it takes diligence, and it takes practice, right? Because you have to, and this is what I tell couples, you got to move over here from negative connection over here to neutral, where you're learning, you're growing, you're unlearning some things and relearning some things, and then you can shift over here to positive connection.
Wow, that's good. So me and you, are from African descent, and one of the things we talk about is the struggle African American men or men of African descent have in corporate America. Based off the individuals that you counsel, can you list out some of the problems they're having and maybe some solutions?
Mm. Yeah, a lot of the gentlemen that I work with, particularly, right, they are coming from places where they may be the only ones, right, that
Mhm,
look like
mhm, mhm.
them. So come from the countries they come from, or just are just people of color. And so one, they have to sometimes answer to and report to people who just don't understand them,
Yeah,
right? Or they may be stereotyped and other things like that. So already they're dealing with that just being misunderstood, and then they feel like they have to be the best,
yeah.
right? That they can't make mistakes because they literally represent an entire race of people, which I don't think is fair, but it just happens because when you are the only one that someone knows, then that is a weight that you have to carry. So and then just their own, right? How they were brought up, right? Do they feel like they have to represent for their family and provide for their family? And so I do see a lot of struggle in that.
What is your recommendation on how to deal with that? So you're going to an environment where you are a minority, both socially and within the company. You aren't going to receive the benefit of the doubt, that level of understanding that your counterparts may. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, it's not forgetting who you are.
Yeah,
I love in the Lion King movie, right, where Simba, he's out there wilding with Timon and Pumbaa and everything, and then Rafiki comes in, right, and he's like, "Hey, you're a king." Right? And so he has to remind him who he is. So I think we need to have these people in our lives, whether it's a spouse, whether it's friends, whether it's people in our church or social communities, that remind us who we are. And so that we always go to that place where we remember, right? And then as you're doing your work, do your work to the best of your ability because you got there for a reason. No one handed you that position, right? You worked for it. And so, you just have to walk out in that confidence.
I think that's important. The Rafiki reference, like, speak on. They say all the time, the lone wolf is probably not in a good situation. It's good for us to hunt in packs, be in a group of men to reassure us. Like, but I do see a lot of male loneliness, not
Mhm.
only from romantic partnership, but also from organic friendships. Can you talk about that and some of the struggles and maybe some solutions?
Yeah, no, that is tough because I can definitely identify with that. But the proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone, and then if you want to go far, you go together. And so, when it comes to loneliness, sometimes you feel like others can't relate to, but you also may push people away.
Yeah.
Right. And so there has to be that awareness of what do you actually need? Right. What do you need for yourself? What do you need to be in the community? What do you need to be connected? And that's really important. So there has to be a self-evaluation, right? There has to be an understanding of, okay, this is what I'm doing, but I need this. And if you don't know, ask for help. I think asking for help is such an undervalued and underutilized thing to do because we feel it's all on me or I have to do it all on my own. But I'm like, none of us got here by ourselves, right? Even if it's someone who gave you a kind word, right? Maybe that was what you needed at that time to continue to go. So please ask for help. Please reach out and seek mentorship.
No, I think you'd be surprised how many people are desiring to help others.
Mhm,
And all you need, like I say, is somebody who's willing to listen, apply some of the lessons. And yeah, I think asking for help probably is the key to one big nugget you shared here.
mhm,
So now let's talk about the business side. Okay.
mhm.
You decided to go out on your own. what motivated that, like dropping your own shingle, putting your own name out there, practicing the way you want to practice. Like, why start your own business?
Yeah, I knew that there would be a difficulty involved in everything like that, but I can handle difficult, right? I think that there's a specific message, there's a calling that I have on my life, and I don't think that even with working with other people, even though I still work with a group practice, that's amazing actually. But I think there's something unique that I'm called to do that I have to do. Right. And I think with that driving me, it also expands my reach to other places where that, this, group practice that I have in Georgia is limited to Georgia. Right. But I want to have the message that I want to share all across the US, right? Even across the world. So I can't just be, saturated in one place, right? I have to be able to spread. And so that is something that inspired me to spread my wings.
So, what attracted me to the mental health space is once you get licensed, you have that option. You have the option of working with somebody and going out on your own. What
Mhm.
has that done for you as far as like bring you a level of professional fulfillment, knowing that, hey, either I have this steady thing that's stable that I know it's there, but I have this other thing where I can take chances, potentially, double my income. Like, what did that do for you as a professional?
Yeah, it did free me up, right, to make my own name and to, really like see what I want to do,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
to
yeah.
do it in my way, right? Because when you work with another practice, you're working under the vision of another person, which even if that is a great vision, right, maybe it aligns with yours, maybe it doesn't. And so really finding that alignment is really the most important thing. And so what it did for me was allow me to exercise both because I'm a good administrative person as well as a good clinical person. You sometimes you get someone who's one or the other, right? And so it's like, man, they're a great therapist. Their notes are terrible, right? They never call you back, and other things like that. And then you have some people who like are really good on the administrative side, but then clinically, they're not great. So it allows me to operate in all my giftings. So that has been a great benefit for me.
Yeah, I tell people, advisors who want to go out on their own, like you have to love servicing clients. You have to have the learn the back office compliance. You have to love the sales aspect. Like you have to be infatuated, interested in all those things, I believe, before you step out really on your own. So you
Absolutely.
decide to hang your own shingle. And how did you find your first clients? Like, what was that like? Talk about the emotions, the thoughts of really saying, okay, I want to do this.
Absolutely. So I knew one, there are just certain things that you have to do, right? You have to have a website. You have to have like a Google business or a Yelp page. These are critical to business because they help with your validity and your credibility. And so I wanted to establish all of the things that establish credibility. And so having my own bank account and all of those things were important to set up. While it was a lot of work to do, but every time you get something done, there's just such a fulfilling
Mhm.
thing that you feel through that. And so, and also, then when I started putting my name in directories, directory is basically like an assembly of different therapists, and it shares about what they do, what they offer, and then you can contact them and set up appointments. So, Psychology Today, for example, is one of the most popular. So I would just, put my name in, sign up for
Mhm.
those services, and then I would see who would contact me. So, and then when you get your first contact, right, and then you get that full fee, right, that you don't have to share. There's nothing like that feeling.
Wow. Talk a little bit more about that. So you get an inquiry from the list services that you're on, and somebody says, I want to work with you. Like,
Mhm.
what is that like?
Well, one, you got to understand that one, man, it takes so much courage to reach out to somebody, right? As we talked about asking for help. And so for someone to reach out, man, I really like take pride in getting back to people because it did take a lot of courage for them to reach out to me in the first place. And then it also takes courage for them to follow up and for them to show up, right? And then to keep showing up. So I really don't take it for granted when people come into my office. I mean, I never show up like, yawning and just, just unprofessional because it's like it really takes a lot for people to show up and to be consistent. And so it's really an honor when people do come into my room.
One thing I'm getting from you is that when you love what you do, I feel like folks try to project that level of service. And I think that's important.
Mhm.
But initially, you decided to do your business online, 100% online. What was your thought process on that strategy? Like, I know ever since COVID, telehealth has been a big thing. Like, what was that for you?
Yeah, so even before COVID, so when I was working on my doctorate, that's when I first started working at a company that had a hybrid option where we would meet people in person and then we would also meet people online. And that was my first taste of meeting with people online. And I really loved it because I can schedule my calls and meet with clients online and they can be anywhere, And then I was able to do my schoolwork, I was able to do other things. And so that idea never left. Uh, and then I moved to Atlanta and was in traffic for like 2 hours, right? And so I'm like, well, I could be seeing two people right now, right? And so it was just a practical and just a wise decision. It was like, well, I could do online. And so I have like a 12-hour day. I don't see people in all of those spots, but I do allow myself to work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Thursdays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. And so it really is helpful for me because I'm able to, kind of just have 3 days that I provide client services, and then I have the other days to be with my family or to work on other projects. So,
That makes sense. So, okay, so you're offering these services 100% online. What is your client avatar like? What is the client mix that gives you the most fulfillment? And also, of course, we're in business, sustains your business economically. Like, who is that person for you?
okay, typically, just a male between the ages of 28 and 48
Mhm.
has been like my sweet spot. This is a person who generally will have some college education. They will be in a long-term relationship. Typically, they're married and may have one child or have a child on the way, or maybe expecting their second child. There's something that happens at that point in their life where they start, saying, "Hey, I can't just suppress these emotions or these feelings anymore." And so they're like, "Hey, I really want to because I don't want to pass this on to the next generation. I want to pass the hurt that I felt. I don't want to pass just whatever these negative things are to the next generation." So they really come in and they are eager to do their work.
Interesting. Speak a little bit about that moment in the man's life. Like, okay, young child running around the house. Already was probably on edge just with marriage and paying a mortgage. Just still paying off student loans, wedding debt. Like,
Mhm.
what are all the little things that a man is juggling that we don't really talk about because we sometimes don't give men space to express
Right.
their challenges?
Right. So kind of attaching to some of the previous conversations we had, the expectation, right? I have an expectation of that a man looks like this and a man does this and a man provides this. And then at a certain point, we just have so much on our back that we just hit a wall, right? Because especially if you're in the corporate America space, right, where you have to present yourself and you're always wearing a mask or you're always doing these things, you just come to a point where you're like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I can't manage this load. It's because, again, this is what I tell a lot of men. It's like if you keep suppressing your emotions and suppressing your emotions and suppressing your emotions, think of it like the Earth's tectonic plates. If you keep pushing down, it's going to build pressure, and eventually there's going to be a geyser that rises up because the pressure needs to be alleviated. So you can let that pressure go slowly and controlled by sharing it and letting a little out at a time, or there will be a big explosion at some point, right? And you will probably lose more than you thought you would.
Gotcha. So you have your ideal client. So where are you finding this man at this age range who are going through these things? How are they finding you? Is it via the list services that you're on? Is it just based off social media posting? Like, what are you doing to attract that person?
Word of mouth referrals are always the best, but generally the online profile, they'll read the profile and something that's in the profile will just attract them. They'll say, hey, it seems like you can connect with me. I also offer free consultations. So people can call me, they can just say, hey, this is what I'm going through, and I share what I do, what I provide. And I think at that point we say, okay, let's try it, and from the first session, one of my supervisors in the past called me sticky, which means that like people they just kind of stay with me, and so even after a lot of my clients reach their goals within the first, I don't know, 4 to 6 sessions, they just stay because there's so much that we can work on. There's identity things, there's healing from the past, and there's all of that. So that's how I find them, and that's how I keep them.
Oh, I like that. So we all have to decide as business owners how much we charge for things. Kind of illustrate your pricing journey. I think you are at a level of advantage because you came from a private practice, so you kind of knew how they charge. But
Mhm.
when you're charging for yourself, I think there's a different level of tension. So kind of explain your pricing strategy and how you apply it today.
Yeah, so there is a kind of a standard practice, right? So if you were to look at what the other counseling services in your area are charging, that can establish a baseline. And so you can go higher or lower based on your education and your expertise, the number of years that you've been doing this. But it also depends because it seems like there's a different structure between in person and online, right? It seems like in person people charge more than they do for online. For me, just for my expertise, for what I have, because I think I undercharge actually, even though people may not think that way, but I do undercharge because there's a certain demographic that I'm trying to reach because I feel called to that population.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So on your journey, which for me seems like to super serve your client base, yeah, you created an intensive program.
Mhm.
Explain, the intensive program, who is it for, and what are the economics behind that?
Absolutely. So an intensive program is basically anything over 3 hours, right? So a standard session is about 50 minutes. Sometimes a couple sessions, some depending on the clinician, maybe about 90 minutes.
Mhm.
So an intensive would be about 3 to 5 to 8 hours, right? That does seem like a long time, but the thing is, when you stop and start, so for example, with my schedule, I see people once a week for 3 weeks, then we go to every other week, and then we go to every 3 weeks. So if it takes me, maybe 3 months to have 12 sessions versus having 12 sessions worth in a day, can you imagine if you've been through a lot of trauma, you can actually maybe resolve a majority of that trauma in that 8 hour period rather than, okay, starting and then I'll see you next week. Then, we talk for 50 minutes. So, what it does is it just streamlines the entire process. And even when it comes to couples, right? So, a reason for an intensive for couples would be infidelity recovery, right? That infidelity recovery session itself is about 2 hours. So if you were to couple that with some of the other skills and creating rules and boundaries and just setting the foundation, then I could see the advantage of the intensive therapy. And so it is more expensive because you're doing it all at once. However, if you're going to spend the money anyway by being in therapy long term, then I think that there is an advantage of doing it through an intensive.
That makes sense because I've been through a couple therapy session, and no matter who you visit, there's going to be 5 to 10 minutes on pleasantries.
Hmm.
Maybe 4 minutes on conclusion
Right.
and next steps. And if you do that over again, meeting after meeting, that's
Mhm.
an opportunity cost lost. And, being people face another area where people can slither in, right?
Mhm.
Which I think is important. Now, it's a little bit more expensive. So, in your mind as a business owner, how do you think about the economics as far as like, is this a more profitable thing for your business? How do you think of it?
Well, I think so, and it's also the allocation of energy, right? So, for some people, sitting with someone for 5 hours is unthinkable and something you can't do. However, if I do that and I, financially benefit from the same of seeing, 6 people or 7 or 8 people, then it's more beneficial if I do the 5 hours, so that yeah, I can then rest, do it on a day off or something like that, or on a weekend. And so, one, it doesn't interfere with your client scheduling, but yeah, I think it's a lot easier to do the intensive than and just have that done on a weekend and then take a day off rather than you're trying to meet with someone for 5 hours on a day that you're seeing other people. It just doesn't work.
So, two things from the clinician perspective, or clinician, like how do you prepare to do therapy for 5 hours? And from the patient, the clients, like how do you prepare to be, I guess, in therapy for 5 hours? Like that's something I have to think about.
Yeah, so you just have to manage your time and take certain breaks. So there's going to be a natural break in just whatever you're doing. So for example, if I'm doing trauma therapy, um, there's something called a target, right? So that would be a specific memory that causes a disturbance,
Mhm.
right? So we rate that disturbance on a scale of 0 to 10. And so the goal is to bring that disturbance from like a 7 to a 0. So once you clear that target, that's an opportunity to take a break, right? So go take a break, get some water, go eat, and other things like that. So you can establish your breaks around targets, or you can have it at certain periods of time. And so it's better than just the regular break where you have to end and, they're leaving or driving away or other things. But what you can have in the intensive is just a break to kind of recalibrate and then come back.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. And from the therapist standpoint, like what are you doing in that break to prepare for the next encounter and or give yourself time to relax?
I mean, this is what I do, right? So this isn't for people who are just starting out, right? I've been doing therapy for like 15 years. So, I can go all day, in therapy because one, it's what I love to do. And when I see the victory that the other person is having, that gives me energy, right?
Yeah.
When I see that, man, this person experienced, abuse and neglect or all these things, and then they're leaving not afraid anymore, or they're leaving with that courage. That energizes me that I can go another 3 hours.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's definitely a sign. One, it's a calling and you love what you do. You put the
Hmm.
time in to get those type of results. Now, as a business owner, I've noticed that people or business owners key in on different numbers, whether that's top line revenue, profitability, interaction with clients. Like what metric for you means that you're winning or succeeding? Are metrics?
Yeah. So when I'm doing my billing, I think I have like a base number. Like, for example, if I need to only see about like 8 or 9 people per week or something like that. However, I have the ability to see 30, right? So I am definitely putting in a buffer because, summer times when kids are home or people are on vacation and other things like that, they may not be coming out to therapy. So I have to logically say, okay, or if I want to take vacation, right? If I don't work, there's not going to be, any revenue for me. So I do have to set up just the practice and the numbers and everything like that to favor being able to have times of drought, but also times for myself that I can recharge with my family.
In your world as a therapist, we call it the finance seasonality, the flow things. In your world, maybe it goes down during the holidays. Potentially, I've seen people go up during the holidays, given certain client base, but down through the holidays to take care of kids. Kids are out. Down in the summer because kids are out of school. I may not have that availability. Like, what is the seasonality for your business and the folks that you serve?
Hmm. Yeah, generally around. So my birthday is a week before Christmas, so there's a natural tendency to shut down around that time anyway,
Natural.
right? So that is the down. So around my birthday until like the new year,
Yeah.
that's generally where you'll see just a down number of people attending. In
Mm-hmm.
addition to around Easter, it's just the high holiday seasons, and then over the summer. So June and July tend to be lower periods, and then when kids get back into school. That's when you see a spike
Yeah.
in attendance for a number of reasons.
The and how do you plan for that? Is it simply okay, well, if I need 8 clients per week to um earn the type of income that I want, I
Mhm.
know during maybe May I have to see 15 to balance out the down in June. Like how do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, it's just again throughout the year, right? So if I'm storing up and making sure that my savings are there, that I'm paying my taxes and that I'm doing everything, I should be able to store enough
Yeah.
by throughout the year. So it's not just like a hey, I know summer is coming, but it's like, no, what am I doing in January and making sure that I'm maintaining like this amount of revenue so that even if no one shows up, that I'm still gonna be okay. So
Yeah.
it's not as much connected to the time period as just the practice of throughout the year.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So you're in a unique situation, which I kind of love working with individuals in your situation. You have the group practice, you have you're self-employed. So that opens up a lot of retirement opportunities. So in this day, how are you planning for retirement?
It's a good question. So with the group practice, I'm a 1099, and then with my practice, I have a W-2. So I do have two 401k plans that I have attached with my business, and so I'm making sure that I'm contributing to that. And so as we talk about, the ebbs and flows and other things, sometimes I can contribute more,
Mhm.
during certain seasons where I'm doing better, and then so I definitely have set those aside.
Gotcha. Okay. And because you're 1099 contract, it's almost like you were always self-employed
Yeah.
from that perspective.
Mhm.
Um, How do you think about accounting?
Mm.
Keeping your books? Do you keep your own books? Do you outsource that to somebody? Like, what is your accounting journey? Because that's always interesting to hear from a business owner.
Yeah, so when I started out, I was just a LLC, sole proprietor and everything, and then I was doing my own Excel sheet and everything like
Hmm.
that. I would submit it to H&R Block, I think, that I
Yeah,
was using at the time. Shout out to H&R Block, but but as I got more sophisticated in my business practices and everything and started making more, I then had to shift my entity structure. So I became an S corp. And then I needed to have more professional services and everything, and people who knew more about my business and practice and other things like that. So I shifted to using, a CPA firm and everything to help me with that because they had to, send the documentation off, and they also had to do more professional, more advanced bookkeeping. And so that's what I've been using to date.
that's good. That's good. That's good. So what advice would you offer somebody wanting to start their own practice? Let's say they're relatively new as a therapist, 5 years in. They say, "Hey, I want to go out on my own." What advice would you give them?
Yeah, definitely. So make sure that you have all your licenses and everything together. You definitely can do it by yourself, and you have to be able to trust yourself to do it by yourself. But make sure, one, that you're just doing good clinical therapy, because that ultimately you can have everything else right. You can have great paperwork, you can have great skills. If you're not doing great therapeutic work, then ultimately you may not survive. So make sure you're doing good clinical work, but then make sure that you have the right support around you, that you have all your taxes done, that you're in compliance with the state, because you don't want problems with the state or the federal government, right? So you want to make sure that your tax situations and everything is well. And then you also need to allocate a budget for either SEO or to have these directories, because people have to be able to find you. If they don't find you, then again, you could be the best clinician in the world, but they're not going to be able to reach you.
Sheesh. What is good therapy? You mentioned, hey, make sure you're doing good therapy, but I'm curious, how are you thinking of good therapy when we talk about being a business owner?
Yeah, so good therapy to me is when someone comes in and they may have their own set of goals, but there's an alignment that they end up with, and that alignment can also lead and should lead to transformation
Yeah,
at a point, right? So the things that they, thought were right, and they were able to correct it through something, right? And again, that's why the theology, psychology, uh, integration is important, right? So you're aligning with who you feel God has called you to be and what Scripture says. And so when you do therapy, that helps people to integrate that and to help them to understand themselves and to heal from their past and just live in wholeness and also prepare for the next generation. That is good therapy right there.
I like it. I like it. So you mentioned that you work with a specific demographic, and I'm sure y'all talk about finances and stuff like that. How can financial planners better help individuals in that demographic?
Yeah, I think maybe dealing with the resistance of financial planning, right?
Mhm.
There's a resistance that says, "Oh, I don't need to do this," or I can do this on my own, right? Sharing your value, but also understanding the emotions of people and what they may struggle with, and seeing how you can help alleviate that struggle from them. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It does. It does.
Yeah, so because if a lot of times people think that they can do things on their own, which is good, and they can. However, you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. And so by you sharing like, "Hey, I can help you and I can give you guidance in this," because a lot of the guys that I see, they're kind of self-made, and I call them unguided, right? So they
Mhm.
had to figure it out on their own, right? How did you make it to corporate America? Hey, by the grace of God, because of my skills and abilities, but I didn't have someone to guide me. Right. So when you show up and you're saying, "Hey, I can help you with guidance in this area," yes, you can probably do it on your own, but man, you can go farther, right, together through the services that we provide.
It makes sense. Very similar to what you start off with, that burden taken off their shoulder. They can
Mhm.
focus on other things. I think that's important. So, Dr. Francis, if somebody wants to reach out to you, they say, "Hey, I fit that demographic," or "I'm just connecting with what he's saying and I want to hear more." What is the best ways they can connect with you?
Absolutely. You can check out my website at intentionalbridges.com. You can also find me on IG at at Intentional Bridges, and I also have my personal page at Dr. James JJ Francis. And so those are ways that you can find me. Feel free to drop me a line and I'd love to hear. And, again, everyone gets a free 15-minute consultation. So come just talk to me, let me know what you're going through and see how I can help.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Francis, for joining us today. He is a licensed mental health counselor. Please tap in with him. Our pre-call, this call has been amazing. So he's full of information. So definitely reach out to him. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Feeling the pressure? You're not alone. I'm Randall Lavery with Diesel Wealth Management, and I specialize in simplifying wealth for those who are near retirement and business owners. We'll create a plan that fits your unique needs so you can actually enjoy the wealth that you built. We consider our firm results driven with a touch of fun. Ready for clarity? Click the Learn More and schedule your free discovery call. Let's build the financial future together.
I appreciate the info, Uncle Money.